Now, even though moves were made that initially took officers Larry Nevers, Walter Butson, Freddie Douglass, and Robert Lesnow from the Detroit police force, two of them were reinstated, Douglass and Lesnow, people immediately began to raise the question, how could these types of brutal white racist police still remain on the city payroll after being involved in so many incidents of brutality and murder against the residents of the city? In fact, Larry Nevers was a member of Stress and had been involved in a killing in, I believe, 1972 and 1973 of a woman at a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant out in northwest Detroit. And he was still on the police force some 20 years later, despite the fact that we had an African-American mayor. Now, this question leads into a myriad of possible analyses which seek to uncover the nature and character of domestic neocolonialism in the United States during the 1990s, all the way up until today. Despite this presence of increasing numbers of African-American elected representatives, the overall oppressive economic and political conditions of African-American people remain in a state of perpetual crisis. In Detroit, even during the early 1990s, it was reported in a newspaper article that only 40% of the city's adult population was gainfully employed. This is in the early 1990s, during the period where it's considered, a fairly decent economic situation. Right. This was taking place at a time period when people were hearing more discussion from official circles about the need to curtail crime and gang-related activity in urban areas. So it's the same thing that came out of the 1960s and 1970s. It was extending into the 1990s as well. During the presidential campaign of Bill Clinton during 1992, he often spoke about a proposal that would have placed 100,000 newly trained and armed police officers on the street of urban areas throughout the country. Clinton, the Democrat, ran on the theme that he's going to put 100,000 cops on the street. And he did. I think he did do that. And a lot of people were put in prison under Clinton's administration. In fact, I've said that, Bill Clinton, even though, a lot of people like him, he put more African people in captivity than since the period of slavery. I mean, real, look at the numbers. I mean, the prison population has quadrupled in the last 3 decades in the United States.
And then took away the right to habeas corpus.
Exactly. The Effective Death Penalty Act, the crime bill, the immigration bill. All this stuff was passed under the Clinton administration.
He signed that, AEDPA.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we have to bring these things up. It was under the tenure of the Bill Clinton that numerous draconian bills were passed, including the crime bill I mentioned, the Welfare Reform Act, that put more and more African American women into the depths of poverty, and women in general, because there are more white women on welfare than there was African American women overall. Although proportionally there's more African American people getting state aid. The Effective Death Penalty Act, as well as the implementation of immigration reform laws that set the stage for the current repression against foreign-born people in the United States. The stage was actually set during the Clinton administration of the 1990s. The other things that happened too, deregulation of the banking industry. Yeah. That occurred under the Clinton administration. A lot of people don't want to remember that. In 1992, after the acquittal of 4 white police officers in the brutal beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles, a mass rebellion erupted that lasted for several days. The rebellion was, after Detroit during 1967, considered the most widespread involving racial injustice in the United States. This phenomenon of mass rebellion in the aftermath of the police trial involving the beating of Rodney King influenced the official response to the murder of Marlise Green. Mayor Coleman Young, several months later after the murder of Marlise Green, fired the 2 main officers who were accused in the killing of Green. A trial during the summer of 1993 resulted in the conviction of Nevers and Butson. This was probably the first time that white police officers in Detroit, and probably in the United States, have been convicted for murder in the killing of an African American. And who came to prominence during that trial? Kim Worthy. That shows what an opportunist she is. She came to prominence as a result of prosecuting that case. And now she will not prosecute any police officers for the murder of civilians. But it never would have been a trial if it hadn't been for the urban rebellions in response to the Rodney King verdict, as well as the mass outrage here in the city of Detroit involving the murder of Marlise Green. But what happened after that? Of course, they in turn took away Recorder's Court from Lansing. They removed the residency requirement for police and for civil service in the city of Detroit. There was a retaliation against the right of self-determination of the people of the city of Detroit. And there's been no movement to reinstate residency requirements, to reinstate the city courts, which were the most effective and efficient courts, some of the most effective and efficient courts that operated in the United States. Therefore, the murder of Aiyana Stanley Jones and the worsening economic crisis in Detroit is where we are today. Young Aiyana's murder by the police has sent shockwaves throughout the city of Detroit and the United States. This death of a child cannot be justified by the criminalization of her family. The cover-up of the murder continues, but the economic crisis facing the city is at the root of the entire situation. Once again, rather than address the underlying causes of violence and its class characteristics, the state, its representatives, and the corporate media, they are still calling for the placing of more cops on the street. More cops on the street will only result in additional deaths of civilians and false imprisonment of the nationally oppressed. The only solution to the problem of police misconduct within capitalist society is the transformation of the state to one controlled by the workers and the oppressed. Only at this stage can the exploited move towards the creation of a socialist state which will empower the people and suppress the reactionary forces within capital. Thank you very much.
Thank you.